Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. A few weeks ago my brother asked if I could help him to find a new monitor because one of his two monitors just died. So when I asked him what he needs, he said that he wants an ultra-wide monitor to also get rid of his second monitor. It must have an IPS panel with a resolution of 3440 by 1440, a refresh rate of at least 120 Hz and G-Sync. What he really wants is the Asus PG35VQ, which was announced back in 2017. Sadly, you still can't buy that monitor and no one seems to know for sure when or if you will be able to get one in 2019. So since he needs a new monitor now and not sometime in the future, I tried to find a monitor that checks all those boxes. But that turned out to be a lot harder than I thought. Eventually my brother decided to go for the Acer Predator X34p, as it was a few €100 cheaper than the Alienware from Dell and it had a 4 out of 5 star rating on Amazon. But this was where things started to get tricky, as I noticed that the 1 and 2 star reviews showed pictures of rather extreme backlight bleed, and some said they had to return the first and the replacement monitor to eventually get one that worked correctly. But since it's a rather painless process to return something on Amazon, my brother said he wants to try and order that monitor. So 3 days later the monitor arrived, I hooked it up to my PC and this happened. The entire left half of the image was jumping up and down by 1 pixel. And this was the out-of-the-box experience at 60 Hz. No overclocking, no nothing. So I changed the DisplayPort cable, I connected it to a different PC, I played around with the monitor settings, but the issue did not go away. I then called the Acer support, which told me that they do not have such an issue in their database, but it sounds like the monitor is broken. Now, since the image quality and the colors were really impressive, my brother decided to send that broken monitor back to Amazon and have them send a new one. Another 3 days later the replacement monitor arrived and this one worked just fine. So we don't know if Acer's quality assurance is to blame here or if the first monitor was damaged during shipping, even though the box did not show any obvious signs of damage. Now, this monitor has an IPS panel which runs at 120 Hz. So let's see how good it is for gaming by comparing it to the Asus PG248Q, which has a TN panel. First, let's take a look at image retention or ghosting. Per default, the overdrive is set to normal on both the Acer and the Asus, which does reduce the ghosting effect. You don't want to disable the overdrive feature or set it to extreme, as you can see here. At 120 Hz and overdrive set to normal, there is faint ghosting between the UFOs on the Acer, which is not present on the Asus. But to be fair, you have to try really hard to actually notice that from a normal viewing distance. So ghosting isn't really an issue on this monitor, at least it didn't bother me once while I was testing this monitor extensively over the last weekend. Now, how bad is the input lag or the responsiveness of that IPS monitor? To test that I use a high-speed camera and a gaming mouse which has an LED connected directly to the switch of the left mouse button, which will turn on when I press it. To measure the button-to-pixel delay, I point my high-speed camera at the monitor and then record what happens when I press the left mouse button. Inside the recorded high-speed footage I then look for the frame where the LED turns on, and then I count the frames until I see the action triggered by that input, which gives me the delay between the button and the pixel. For the first test I used CSGO, which ran at the native resolution of the monitor at 300 FPS and 60 Hz with VSync and G-Sync disabled. In this test I then measured an average button-to-pixel delay of 27.27 milliseconds, that's less than 2 frames at 60 Hz. I then ran the same test on the PG248Q monitor, where I measured an average button-to-pixel delay of 24.73 milliseconds, so no major difference here. Then I repeated the same test at 120 Hz, with pretty much the same outcome as the Asus was only about 2 milliseconds faster than the Acer. Now, if you can run a game at 300 FPS, then you would also increase the refresh rate to up to 180 Hz on the Asus PG248Q, which would decrease the button-to-pixel delay further. But let's face it, most players can't run games at such high frame rates. Something around 110 FPS is a much more realistic value, especially when you play games that are very demanding, like Battlefield 5. So with the built-in FPS limiter set to 115 and the monitors running at 120 Hz, I measured an average button to pixel delay of 38.33 milliseconds with the Acer and 36.6 milliseconds with the Asus. Then I enabled G-Sync on both monitors to test if that has an impact on the delays. But as you know from my previous videos, G-Sync does not affect the button to pixel delay. So the first monitor we got was broken, but the second monitor then worked fine and neither of these two had issues with backlight bleed that other people seem to have problems with. Compared to a TN monitor, ghosting is slightly worse on the Acer Predator X34p, but at a normal viewing distance and a refresh rate of 120 Hz, you must look really hard to notice the difference. Colors are great as you'd expect from an IPS monitor, though at this price I'd expect Acer to do the color calibration at the factory. But we used a Spider 5 here to do the color calibration and it wasn't too far off. It would be great if the monitor could do more than 120 Hz. Not because that would greatly reduce the input lag, but games do feel smoother at 160 Hz. That said, during my tests I used RTSS to limit the frame rate at 115 to always stay inside the G-Sync window, and I really enjoyed that experience. Overwatch didn't feel as smooth as I usually play at 160 FPS and 160 Hz, but at no point did I feel that the Predator was holding me back. However, a professional gamer will probably feel different. So, after I edited this video on this monitor and spent quite some time playing World of Warships, Warframe, Battlefield and Overwatch, I can absolutely recommend this monitor for content creators and gamers who are not playing games at a highly competitive level, where the difference between 120 Hz and 240 Hz might actually matter. But if you think about buying one, then please make sure that you can easily get a replacement or return the monitor should you run into any issues with the monitor you get. As I said, I'm not sure if Acer has major issues with its quality assurance or if the monitor was damaged on its way here. But it is concerning to see that quite many people seem to have major issues with this monitor. Now, there are a few more things that I would like to share with you. Going from a 16:9 monitor to an ultra-wide means that your PC must run games at a larger resolution, which has an impact on your frame rate, especially when you run games at the native resolution of this monitor. To increase your frame rate, you can lower the render scale or render resolution value in games like Battlefield, Fortnite or Overwatch, which will then render the game at a lower resolution, while all the HUD elements and menus stay sharp and crisp, as these get rendered at the native resolution of the monitor. If a game does not offer such an option, then you can add a lower 21:9 resolution, which you can then use just for gaming to increase the frame rate, while you enjoy the native resolution of the monitor when you browse the internet, watch videos, use Word, or do any kind of content creation. Playing at a lower resolution isn't really an issue. However, you'll notice that 2560 by 1080 does not look good on such a big monitor when you do anything else besides gaming. So if you plan on buying an ultra-wide monitor, then you want it to support 3440 by 1440 pixels. Another thing that is important to know is that if you run a game at 1920 by 1080, then you might end up with this. To prevent that the image gets stretched to fit the monitor, you must enable Override the Scaling mode set by games and programs inside the NVIDIA control panel if you use a graphics card from NVIDIA. Another neat trick is to use the screen safe zone options in games to adjust the position of the HUD elements. I like to move the HUD away from the left and right edges and more towards the center of the screen, as that makes it easier to keep an eye on these HUD elements. So, now it's time for me to say goodbye to that monitor, as my brother is eagerly waiting for me to finish my tests and let him use his monitor. It is funny how quickly you get used to an IPS panel and the huge screen. A good ultra-wide monitor does not make you a better gamer, but it provides a great experience and offers a real benefit, especially when you use applications that take good use of that large display. And that's all for today. If you enjoy the videos that I release on my channel and would like to support what I do, then you can find a link to my Patreon in the description down below. Without the awesome support that I get from my patrons, Battle Nonsense could simply not exist anymore. So if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris and this was Battle Nonsense.